Okay, then. Hello, everybody. I'm Kathryn from the Sewing Studio at Lady Lake and the Sewing Studio Fabric Superstore. Welcome aboard. So today we're going to have a little vocabulary quiz. Just kidding. There's no quiz. Summer. It's summertime. School's out for summer. But we are going to go over some words. Sometimes I find that when I read a pattern or I go to do something, I'm like, what the heck? That is a term I have never heard before. And pattern writers sometimes assume that you know more than you do. So today we're going to just go over some basic terminology, okay? Excellent. Let's get started. Okay, so first of all, let's start with the selvage edge and the raw edge. Okay, so the selvage edge of a fabric is going to be the edge of the fabric that is where you have it meeting, the two sides meet together, and that is where on the loom the threads come and wrap around so that there is no fraying on your selvage edge. Now your raw edge is going to be this part of your fabric where you're going to be doing, where when you cut it, it's going to end up fraying. That is going to be the raw edge of your fabric. Okay, so in talking about that, let's talk about warp and weft. All right, warp and weft. So when you have a piece of fabric, it's put together obviously with threads that are woven on a loom. So your warp threads are the threads that go this direction. They run the whole length of the fabric. Your weft threads are going to be perpendicular to the selvage edge. These are the threads that are shot through left and right and left and right. So that's why it frays up here on this side. So again, warp is the length of fabric, the length of the whole run of the fabric, and weft is going to be the ones that go across across those other threads. Okay, then let's talk about grain, because you'll hear common terms of, oh, that's cut it on the straight of grain, cut it on the cross grain, cut it on the bias. Okay, so grain basically refers to how your warp and your weft threads come together. So a straight of grain, your straight of grain is going to be parallel to your selvage edge. That's your straight of grain running along the whole length of the fabric. Your the cross grain is going to be along your raw edge. The cross grain is going to be perpendicular to the selvage edge. And your bias, if it says cut it on the bias is actually the diagonal of the two. So it's not going to be parallel to the selvage and it's not perpendicular to it. It's going to be at that 45-degree angle for the most part on that diagonal line. Actually, when you cut things on the bias, that's why you get a little bit of a stretch. So that because of the way the threads are, it allows them to separate and spread out a bit. So that's the bias. All right, so first page is done. Let's go on to page 2. Okay, nap. I know I like to take them, and I don't get the chance very often, but specifically this time we're going to talk about the nap of the fabric. The nap of the fabric is the way when you have something fuzzy or furry, it's the way, or like a towel, that's the way that those lay. So I remember distinctly my favorite velour running outfit when I was like 7 years old. And I would always be like, oh, this feels so soft. Ooh, not so soft. Oh, this feels so soft. So that's the nap of the fabric, whether you are feeling it with the threads that lay down one way and not the other. That's the nap. Okay, the next thing we have is WOF. So you'll see expressions written down or abbreviations that sometimes don't. What does that exactly mean? So WOF actually stands for width of fabric. So the width of the fabric, if we pull this back over, the width of the fabric is from selvage edge to selvage edge. That's your width of fabric, okay? RS, you'll see that written down. That basically means the right side of the fabric. So if we look at this fabric, you very clearly have a right side and a wrong side. The right side will have what's printed or dyed or stained, and then the wrong side is generally a little bit more. Um, it's not as vibrant. It's just the white side, essentially. So you have your right side is going to be that printed side. All right, next page. Then you'll see RST. RST would stand for right sides together. So sometimes when I'm teaching a lesson on the serger, I'm like, all right, we're going to put this right sides together. Oh, wait, no, we're going to put it wrong sides together. Depending on how you construct your pattern, they're going to ask you to do it differently so that the final effect is going to be where you don't have half of your shirt with the right side and half of your shirt with the wrong side. So RST is right sides together for seaming specifically. WS would be wrong side. Okay? And then again, WST is wrong sides together. So you can have RST or WST, right sides together, wrong sides together. Okay? All right, next page. Okay. So sometimes you'll hear, especially in your manual when you're reading, this stitch is meant for woven fabric or this stitch is meant for knit fabric. So woven fabrics tend to be fabrics that have no stretch. There might be a little bit in there, but honestly, most of the time there's like zero stretch at all. So the fibers that are in there are going to be cottons and rayons and linens and things like that, natural fibers for the most part. Knit fabrics have stretch. Sometimes they have a little stretch. Sometimes they have a lot of stretch. Sometimes their stretch is two-way. Sometimes their stretch is not only this way, but also that way, making it a four-way stretch. Stretch fabrics have elastic in them, or lycra, or spandex, or whatever is going to give it the ability to stretch. So some stitches are appropriate for wovens, some are appropriate for knits, and you want to make sure you're using the right stitch for the right type of fabric. Okay, sometimes these expressions are used interchangeably: interfacing, stabilizer, linings. So with interfacing, stabilizer, and linings, they're actually different. So interfacing tends to be used more with garment construction. You'll see, oh, get that interfacing, whether it's fusible, meaning you iron it in, or non-fusible, meaning you sew it in. Basically, what an interfacing does is it beefs up your fabric. It gives it a little bit more body, more stability, more structure. So that goes, usually interfacings are used with garments, whereas stabilizers are to in terms of embroidery, because with embroidery you have dense and multi-directional stitching. So it's like doing the whole clock, which is going to be pulling on the fabric and the different grains of the fabric. Your warp and your weft are going to be pulled differently. So stabilizer is there to help support all of those extra stitches in embroidery. However, if you think about a buttonhole, and that's a sewing thing, like in making a garment, obviously, buttonholes have a lot of dense multi-directional stitching in them as well. So sometimes a stabilizer is good to be used down your strip of where you're going to be installing your buttonholes and things like that. You can also find stabilizers used with like lighter weight fabrics, more sheers, chiffons, things like that. So sometimes stabilizer for the most part is used for embroidery, but occasionally you do use it in sewing. And then lining. So lining is something that is generally put in a garment to kind of cover up the constructional features within the inside. Basically, it covers it up and it's like it's just as pretty on the inside as it is on the outside. So that's generally lining, just covers all that up. Lining tends not to give extra structure or support to what you're working on. It just is there to basically cover things up and keep it pretty on the inside. Okay, the last but not least is drape. What's the drape of a fabric? So the drape of a fabric is basically the way that it hangs. You have on a flowy dress, then it's a very drapey dress. It's very flowy. It has life. It breathes when you move or whatever. But if you have on a stiff like Chanel jacket, that sucker is very, very stiff. So it's going to have a much stiffer drape to it. So drape is used to kind of like express how that fabric moves or doesn't move in terms of its life on the person, the wearer, the garment, the item, etc. So that's your basic vocabulary today. I'm hoping in the next couple of months or soon in the future to also have some more sewing terms and starting to get into some of those things too. So look forward to that. See it in the future. If you like today's video, please share. Share it with your friends. Give it a thumbs up. You can always visit us at www.sewing.net and on YouTube and on Facebook. And we'd love to see your friendly faces in our store. Thanks for watching, everybody, and have a great day.